Hey everybody, today we're talking about negotiating a job offer in higher education. So I have tips, especially for teacher educators looking for a job in higher education. So let's just dig in. So the first thing is I just want to welcome you back to the channel where I'm talking about teaching for life, ways that we can keep our teaching life alive and thriving. And for me, if you watch some of the other videos, you know that I was a K-12 teacher who transitioned into teaching higher ed. And one of the things that allowed me to do that was having a PhD. And I got that PhD. I started it around year 6. I finished it around year 10. And then I stayed teaching for another 5 years before I decided to look for another teaching job in higher education. And so I'm going to share with you today some of the things that I considered and some of the things I wish I considered about negotiating a job offer in higher education. So let's dive in. Landscape. In higher education, especially public higher education, much like public school education K-12, there's a salary scale. The salary is typically fixed and it's publicly available on the World Wide Web, so everyone can find out how much everyone gets paid. You can search it up pretty easily. So typically there's not much room for negotiating your base pay. However, that doesn't mean that you are out of options. So this is important to consider when you say, what is your base pay or what is the range of pay and what are the qualities or criteria involved in negotiating that? That's really important to understand before you go in and they offer you something and you're saying like, is that your best offer? Well, they don't always have a best offer, but they might have some reasons for the offer. And sometimes the offer is related to what the base pay is and what is publicly available, other things that you can negotiate. Okay, so this is really important to think about. The things that you can negotiate if salary is off the table. So the first thing is spousal hire. If your partner is in academia or if your partner is looking for a job, some institutions might offer some spousal hire opportunities. So this can be a significant benefit and worth discussing. It depends on your situation with your spouse. It depends on their line of work. It depends on what they're looking for. But in our situation, spousal hire wasn't really something that I knew to negotiate, so I didn't even ask about it. But I do know several colleagues at my institution and other institutions who were able to negotiate a spousal hire, which made relocating so much easier. And that spousal hire could be in academia. It could be another professorship, a tenure track. It could be the role as an instructor. So it may not be a tenure track full-time position that has like a long-term job opportunity, and it might be like a year-to-year sort of rehiring. It could be also in an administrative like role, so in a different department within the university, like admissions or something along those lines. So it might be a completely different kind of job within the institution and not necessarily a tenure track or instructional position. It could be something different. And if the spousal hire isn't something that you can negotiate, if it doesn't seem like if it's on the table, it is something that you and your spouse should talk about what kind of work that they're going to do when they move if you have a partner. And so that's something to consider whether or not you accept a job offer is if your partner is able to get a job where you are relocating to. And I would just say in my work, I've known several faculty members whose spouses stayed behind. They stayed living in the house in a different state. They kept their job and they visited each other during breaks and all in the summer and took their full sabbatical together and all of that. So you have to figure out what works best for you and your family. Okay, the second thing that you can possibly negotiate is travel costs. So in my situation, I was living in Chicago and I was relocating to Oklahoma. So I had to talk about if there's any travel reimbursement or support. So we had to go to Oklahoma one time to do some house hunting and apartment hunting. So that was one trip that required, you know, airfare, hotel, all of that. In my situation, they weren't negotiating that visiting that I had to do in order to find a house. But the second was relocating as far as like moving costs, like a moving van, yeah, paying a moving van or paying for movers or hiring a truck on your own. And sometimes they give you a flat rate, like here's a flat rate of how much they're going to pay you. And you can accept the pay or it can come in your paycheck. So there's a couple ways that you can get that money. So you might want to ask like the travel expenses that you might want to check actually to see how much it costs for you to relocate across the country, and the distance will matter. So if you're just going a couple states over versus going um, from one coast to another, it's going to cost different. So you want to think about negotiating that moving cost as well. So that's travel as in relocation. So that's travel as in relocation. Okay. The third thing that you can negotiate is travel as in professional development. So you can negotiate if you want to attend conferences in another state, if you need registration for a conference, if you want to attend workshops, if you want to collaborate with other institutions and colleagues and conduct research in a different state or different community. So those, it might be mileage for driving, it might be airfare, hotel, per diem costs, things like that. So you want to find out what is the institution willing to give you to offset some of those professional development and research costs. Now, some institutions have this. They have a really hefty amount of money that they're going to offer you, a couple $1,000s. Some have very little or no money, and they're not going to guarantee you anything every year. And it's up to you to make a case for how much money you want. And then typically, or sometimes your school head or dean can find money for you. So if there's something you want to do, you have to ask for it. You have to make a case for it. So all of those things are nice, but you want to know whether or not that's possible. Is it automatic money that you get every year for your professional development and travel? Or is it something you have to ask for and negotiate? Or is it something you have to fund yourself by getting a grant? So these might be some things that you can negotiate, but you need to kind of know what the university stance is on these things to find out how much you can negotiate. So those are some things to think about there. Okay. The fourth thing that you can negotiate, are we at four? I think we're at four, is course release. So you can ask about the possibility of a course release in your first year. So if you want to understand how the courses work, 2x2, 3x3, 4x4, you want to watch my other video that I just made that probably came out the week before this, is about tenure track positions and how to do a job search, right? So watch that video because it's going to explain your course load. But in this situation, for your first year, you're going to probably have a pretty good chance in negotiating some sort of course release. And what that means is if your typical teaching load for that position is going to be 2x2, meaning 2 courses in the spring semester, 2 courses in the two courses in the fall semester, 2 courses in the spring semester, you might be able to negotiate a course release as in only 1 in the fall and 2 in the spring, or 1 and 1, especially if your first year, while you're just like launching your research or launching some service project. This is very typical and probably likely that they would give you at least 1 course release. And along those lines, which might be 5, because it's related to courses, it might still be 0.4. You can negotiate summer salary. Now, typically, if you're in a tenure track position or getting your job, it's a 9-month salary. And if you taught any courses in the summer, you would get paid extra for teaching summer. But what I'm saying is that you might get summer writing benefits. So you might be able to ask for a summer writing summer writing pay. And I think I was able to negotiate that my first year. I'm not sure, but you might say, I have this project underway. I want to get paid for doing research in the summer. And some institutions do give you that. They're going to give you summer pay for doing your research. But they might just say, no, you can have summer pay if you teach an extra course. So that's another way of thinking about negotiating that part as well. All right, so negotiating courses is a lot about negotiating your workload. But I want to talk a little bit more about negotiating workload. And that's a really critical aspect. So while salary might be fixed, You can often negotiate your teaching load to allow more time for research, especially if you bring additional funding through grants or summer teaching opportunities. So asking for a single course release for 1 year, as I mentioned, or a summer course for writing, as I mentioned, those are possible. But you also may be able to negotiate a longer term workload arrangement where you might be on a 2-1 indefinitely, or as long as you're being productive in your research. So that might be something that you can negotiate. This is probably more likely to happen if you at a research one university where they really value research and they really value grants. So if you're coming into your teaching position with grant money or with some sort of like large funding, chances are that they're going to let you negotiate your workload and your teaching load at the time that you sign your contract. And I would do what you can to get that written in your contract, because when it comes time to getting your promotion or your tenure, you're going to have to go back to your contract and say, did you do the things that were in your contract, and have you performed according to those things? So if they say in your contract, you're 2-1 or 2-2, and then you end up having to teach overload courses, well, then you mention that in your promotion and tenure. If they say that you're supposed to be teaching 2-2, but then they gave you a course release, but didn't put that in writing anywhere, they might be thinking, oh, you're not teaching the load that you're supposed to be already. So again, just getting those things in writing when you're negotiating, it's uncomfortable. It is. It's uncomfortable to ask for things and to keep pushing back. And if you're a teacher, you're probably used to just taking what you get and having it be good enough and maybe not negotiating any number of those things. But it's important at this early stage to negotiate those. Okay, so here's 3 things to consider when it comes time to service. So negotiating the service part. Now, again, in that other video, when I talked about looking for a higher ed job, and job calls and all of that, I talked about there being a 2-2 teaching load or a 3-3 teaching load. What that means is the other part of your job is research and service. So you have a teaching workload, but you also have service, and research. So 3 things. Okay, so what you want to negotiate or talk about is your time as it relates to service. So you want to say you have time for your teaching, you have time for your research, and maybe service is less immediate, less important right up front, unless the job call is talking about coordinating a program or launching an initiative. So if you don't see in the job call that your services is really important, this might be an area of negotiating, where you can say, I would like at least my first couple of years to not be on a lot of committees or to have to be coordinating too many programs or starting any new initiatives, because I want to work on my teaching and work on my research. So sometimes you will have great mentors and school leaders who will say to you, we're going to protect you your first year, your second year. They said that a lot to me. We're protecting you. We're protecting you. We're not asking you to serve on this committee. We're not asking you to take up this new thing. We're not asking you to be on an ad hoc board or something along those lines. We're protecting you because we want you to focus on your teaching and focus on your research and be successful there. So this might be something where you can say right away, maybe I don't want to be on a lot of committees, so I can focus on these other things. And typically your school head or whoever's hiring you is going to say, oh yeah, yes, we will protect you your first couple of years so you can really focus on your research or really focus on your teaching. Again, unless that job call is about a service project that they're hiring you for, so that's really important to think about. Okay, another thing that you might ask about as you're negotiating is funds. If there's any internal funding for opportunities like research projects or professional development. So I mentioned about travel costs and professional development, like getting a stipend every year, $1,000, $2,000 for your professional development, but there might be additional internal funding. Your school might have a pot of money set aside for research projects. and you might have some research startup funds. This is the key here. So they might say, we're going to give you $5,000 in your first year, or that you can use in the first 2 years. And those can help you start up some projects and get some funding going. If you need to buy some books to do some reading, if you need to pay participants, if you need to do some traveling. So you might have some research startup funds, and that would be really incredible if you could have that, or to start your own lab or something like that. So that would be great if you could negotiate some of that in addition to your professional development. The other thing they might say to you is that they'll give you some additional training about research. So when I first started, there was a Friday meeting every Friday or every other Friday with a group of with the research department at the university, and they were teaching me sort of the ins and outs of research. So that was some professional development that they offered for free, or that they included. It wasn't really negotiating, but it was something that they said, we're here to support you and we're going to offer you this. We're not going to pay for your professional development to do that. We're going to provide the sort of professional development for you. And that was a way, they're really investing in your success, in your research success and your teaching success. So they're introducing you to the resources at the university to support you. And so there might be some funds for that, or it might just be included as part of your mentorship in starting at the university. So along those lines of support, you might also be given a graduate research assistant or a teaching assistant, probably a research assistant. So that might be something you can ask about as well. Are you going to get a research assistant? And typically you can, if they do give you a research assistant, that might be something that you use in your second year. Maybe your first year, you're getting a research study up and running, and then in your second year you have the research going, and you're going to use your research assistant to help with data analysis or transcribing, or setting up appointments with participants, gathering some literature for the literature review, any number of those things. Or you might be in charge of a project like the writing project or something, and you're granted a graduate assistant to help you with some of the administrative tasks. So if you're going to have a graduate assistant in your first or second year, that's something you can negotiate, you can ask for, you can find out if it's even a possibility. Okay, here is where I got some really great advice. What does it mean to be productive in academia? And what does successful mean at this particular university? So one of the favorite bits of advice that I got from a friend, and it was actually a volleyball friend, who said to me, in your interview, you should ask, a year from now, 5 years from now, what does someone who's successful in my position look like? What have they achieved? What criteria would you use? So I asked this question. I said, what do you want in a year? What will it look like if I'm successful, right? And it's really important what their answer is going to be, because you'll get a sense of what they value. And for me, I wanted to hear something about students first, because that was important. So being successful as an educator, being successful with students, making sure that my reviews were really good, but also that I was collaborating with students, I was collaborating with faculty to design and imagine and innovate in my teaching and the curriculum that we were working on. But the other thing is really important, especially if you're at a research university, is what the productivity means as far as publications are concerned. And so this is an important to ask a couple questions about. So ask about publications. Do the publications have to be all research, like empirical research? Can some of the publications be practitioner? As a teacher educator, it makes sense that your publications would be practitioner. And what journals are preferred, or what journals are celebrated and uplifted? So in our field, the English journal is a practitioner high school journal. Voices from the Middle is a practitioner middle school journal. English Education is a practitioner teacher educator journal. Teaching Writing is a practitioner writing teacher educator journal. These are valued in our community. This is where people are publishing. But there's other journals as well Well, research and the teaching of English is another one that has to do with the researchers in our field. These are journals that we read, that I care about, that I like to publish in. But you want to know if your university has a sense of what other journals there might be, or what kind of writing, if it's practitioner or empirical research. The second is how they value books and book proposals or book publishing. You may have a book, you maybe have a book in the works when you're getting hired. You may have already published a book when you're getting hired. But you want to know how your university feels about books versus article publications. So at my university, it seemed like they cared more about, well, actually, they articulated that they're more interested in peer-reviewed journal publications and high-tier peer-reviewed journal publications. That's what they value. Books are nice, but actually, you know, if you're writing 10 or 12 chapters in a book, it's kind of like 10 or 12 journal articles, right? So I might break that up on my CV so I could get credit for all those different chapters and things like that. But your field, your area of research, this matters. And it also matters about your view of yourself and what kind of scholar or educator you want to be. I find that books are the ones, the people who publish books, especially with a great press, are the ones who are invited to speak at presentations and conferences in school districts. And teachers buy those books because, you know, teachers have access to those books. Journal articles are not things that teachers typically have access to. They're behind paywall unless it's an open education resource or publication. So, and also teachers aren't technically reading research very often. A lot of times we're looking for really practitioner pieces. So you want to have an idea of like what your university values, but also what you value as a teacher, educator, and researcher. And if they align, like with what the university is saying is successful versus what you think is successful and what you value. And then that other part about service, like in finding out what successful service means for your university. It's pretty typical in assistant level that they want you involved in your state and region. So joining your state affiliate of the National Council of Teachers of English, or reading association, or writing project site, any of those kind of things in your state is really important to do as an assistant professor, and starting to build toward a national presence at the national organizations. And then as a full professor, building toward an international recognition and presence of service. So building up your service, but you want to ask them what they think is important and what they're going to call successful. So you have a sense of, again, if the university's goals align with yours, or if you need additional mentorship or have questions about how to get involved in any number of service opportunities. So what is really important takeaway of this like middle segment here is you want to be clear about how you plan to be productive, what productive means, and ways that you can strengthen and negotiate your position to make sure this is really clear going in. You're also demonstrating your commitment to advancing the institution's mission and justifying any requests that you have about having a teaching load reduction, or more funding for your research, or more support with travel for your service. So if they're saying those things are important, you want to be able to negotiate support in the things that they say are important to them, but also, you know, what's important to you. Like, that's really important. All right, so we have one more thing to talk about, and it's sabbaticals. So, all right, I think this is a part. I didn't really ask any questions about this when I was hired at my job. A sabbatical is a year, half a year or a year off of work to explore new things, pursue a research project or a book project, rejuvenate, go back to teaching for a little bit, any number of things. Now, not every university has sabbatical as part of their hiring package, or part of their university. So you have to ask this question. I mean, I think it makes sense to ask this question. is there sabbatical? Is there sabbatical support? So it's one thing to take a sabbatical. It's another thing, are they going to pay you while you're on sabbatical? So this is something that you want to definitely ask about. All right, so some things that you can ask. First of all, when can you apply for sabbatical? Typically, you can apply in your 6th year and then take it in your 7th year. And typically, this is related to your promotion from assistant professor to associate professor. The second thing is to ask about the duration of your sabbatical. Typically, institutions will offer full pay for half a year or half pay for full year, but some institutions will pay as much as full pay for a full year. You could take a full year to work on that book, to take a teaching job. And I think, depending on your institution, you can take your pay, your sabbatical pay, and get paid if you get a job at a school. So you could go back to teaching for a year and brush up on some of your K-12 teaching skills, get paid for that teaching position, since there is not really a teaching shortage. It's just a lot of teachers out there, but not a lot of teachers wanting to teach under these conditions. But you could go back to the classroom for a year, get paid, and get some of your sabbatical money potentially. So you want to ask about that. And so some policies will allow you to have your full pay for a year, some your full pay for half a year. Again, this depends on your family, your situation with your family, whether or not you can afford to take a year with half pay if your partner is working. How much are your overhead payments as far as your mortgage and your car payment and all that? Like, can you make that work? Again, are you getting paid for other work while you're on your sabbatical? Is that allowed? Like, any number of those questions are really important. And I'm applying for my sabbatical right now. So this is just a little bit of like insider information. I did get my associate promotion and tenure. I can maybe do a video about that if you're interested. And then I found out that I can get half my pay for a full year or full pay for a half a year, and that I needed to apply in May. I needed to apply in May, or let my school head know in May of my fifth year, in May, that I plan to take my sabbatical. And then in September, I have to write my proposal and send that to my school head, and the school head and the dean will make a recommendation. And then that proposal goes to some committee in January, I think, and then I'll find out whether or not I can take my sabbatical starting the next August. But there's lots of planning. Like, I have to have my proposal and my plan for potentially a year later, about what I want to do during my sabbatical a year before I take it. And there might be some things changing along the way. So I don't really know exactly how all that's going to work, but as I find out, I'll make some videos about it. And if I do end up getting the sabbatical, I'll take you along for the ride with me, so I can tell you how that works. So essentially, what's important to remember about sabbaticals is that they're often governed by institutional policy, so you may not be able to negotiate it, but you want to know the terms, you want to know the process, and planning ahead is really crucial. And getting a sense for how the people hiring you feel about sabbaticals, if they've taken a sabbatical, and how that might factor into things. Because I got to say, you're going to work really hard. I felt like I worked really hard as an assistant professor, and the affordance of this job. I mean, I've told you in other videos that I took a pay cut from my teaching job from K-12 to take this, and I moved across the country away from my family and friends and my hobbies. And there's been a lot of affordances of this job with flexibility and research and service, and I've done a lot of great things that I'm really proud of, but I've been working really hard. And so if an affordance of this position is that I can take a sabbatical for a year, and write a book or do additional research, or nurture international relationships with other schools, you bet I'm going to take that, and I'm not going to feel bad about it, because if that's part of my institutional policy, I'm going to take it, I'm going to use it, and it's going to boost and propel me through the next stage of my teaching life. So I don't feel bad asking about it, and I mean, I should have asked about it. I didn't, but don't feel bad asking about it, because this is going to help you be a really productive, successful, wonderful, caring, energized faculty member if you're able to take the sabbatical and bring back what you learned. Okay, so negotiating a job offer requires a strategic approach. I was fortunate to have a few colleagues that I could reach out to, texting them, going on Facebook Messenger, asking questions as I was trying to negotiate my position, and which happened really fast. And I felt a little pressured, but I also felt like I wanted the job, so I didn't feel worried about delaying them. I was sure that it was going to be a good fit, but I still felt pressure to make a decision pretty quickly. Still, like focusing on the areas that you know would have the most impact on your career and your personal life, and um, those are deeply interconnected for me. Um, Knowing what those are will help you navigate the negotiation process and also understand the offer letter that they give you where they tell you, you know, we're going to give you a course release, or you are going to have a sabbatical, or you're a 2-2 teaching load, any number of those things. You're going to be more prepared to ask follow-up questions, clarifying questions, rather than just signing it because you don't know what to ask. So hopefully this video has helped you think about what kind of questions you can ask, what kind of things you might be able to negotiate, what kind of things you might need to understand better. Any number of those things would be great if this video helped you. If you have additional questions, you know, please like comment, ask the questions in the comment. If this is useful for you, subscribe and then do that bell thing so you get a notice when new videos come out. I'm trying to do this every Friday, or so that they come out every Friday, so that you have a little bit of a nugget of information a little bit each week. But also I'd love to hear any additional tips or advice that you have if you are one of those people writing those offer letters or negotiating the contracts, like you have insider tips. I'm speaking from someone who, you know, is in higher education. I'm not in a leadership position. I don't make these offer letters. So getting a perspective from someone like that might be really great. So if you are one of those people, please comment below. And I think that's all for today. If you think of anything else, let me know in the comments. And until next time, see ya.